"Eat your dinner, Elias," Thorn called out, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. The air smelled of floor wax and old damp paper. Elias sat at the far end of the oval, his fingers tracing the deep gouges in the wood. Across from him, his best friend Julian was eating peas with a mechanical, rhythmic precision that made Elias's stomach churn. Julian did not look up. He did not speak. 3 days ago, Julian had been the kid who hid frogs in the headmaster's boots and whistled through his teeth. Now, he was a statue of perfect obedience, kids, it usually held. Efficiency leads to excellence, repeating children to laborious passions into his master. Affectionately as here we be. The integration is complete, the double said. Its voice rattled the window panes in their leaden frames, threatening to shatter the glass. He checked his watch, 2 AOEN. This was the time when the difficult students were usually summoned. He heard the heavy thud of boots in the hallway. It wasn't the light step of a night watchman. It was the synchronized march of the prefects, the older boys who had already been turned his pocket. He wasn't going to become a shadow. I tried to run, but they caught my shadow. On the entrance behind a tapestry in the north wing. A passage used by servants a century ago. It was his only chance to move through the school without being spotted by the cameras or the empty-eyed students who patrolled the main halls. As he climbed a steep set of wooden stairs, the wood groaning under his weight, he heard a scratching sound. It was coming from inside the walls. He couldn't filing. Tried to run, but they caught my shadow. They pinned it to the floor with those silver pens. I'm fading, Elias. Where Casanova move was. The ends of rage turning mate to the deeper shadows where he couldn't follow. He turned and ran, the sound of his own heavy breathing the only companion in the dark. The temperature dropped with every step, the air growing thick with the scent of ozone and vinegar. Elias reached the boiler room, a cavernous space filled with hissing pipes and the orange glow of the furnace fires. But the fires were dying. The coal was being ignored. The heaters left to sputter out as the school embraced the unnatural cold of the storm. He moved past the massive iron boilers, his own shape, a silhouette of ink that began to mimic his movements. As Elias shifted his weight, the shadow shifted. As he reached for a bottle of turpentine, the shadow reached into the air. It was a horrifying pantomime. He realized with a jolt of terror that the shadow wasn't just a copy. It was a parasite. It was for the moment he gave up so it could step into his skin. He knew he only had one shot. If he threw it and missed, or if it didn't ignite, he was finished. He looked at the furnace. The iron door was slightly ajar, a sliver of orange flame licking at the air. Elias clawed at the man's hands, but it was like trying to pry apart steel bands. He could see the reflection of the fire in Thorn's yellow eyes, and for a second he saw the truth. Thorn wasn't human either. Underneath the fine wool suit, his skin was cracking, revealing the same black void that filled the well. "You are just ink," Elias wheezed down. He flashed the glider into the well. The fire had died down to a few flickering embers, and the cavern was filled with a thick, gray smoke that tasted of burnt plastic. He groaned, his body aching in places he didn't know he had. He pushed himself up, his hands covered in soot. The well was empty. Only a charred, cracked stone basin remained, stained with a dry, flaky residue. Thorn was gone. The faculty were gone. In their place were piles of gray dust and empty, discarded clothes. The parents to Skull in the Jaiko, with the nations frowned to the field of friends. Okay in hand with times of firing, Sissity. It the axe Samley, and it talked to the boiler room. The boilers were cold, the oppressive, heavy feeling that had hung over the school for months had lifted. He climbed the stairs to the great hall, it be having it to the husking at Barry of area. He looked down at his feet. There in the pristine snow was a spark drop. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. Was it ink? He knelt down, touching it with a trembling finger. It was cold, it was wet. He lifted Averia's She Looks Solid, now a morning drive. Their sirens were distant, a melodic promise of rescue. He looked down at his feet. There, in the pristine snow, was a single, dark drop. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. Was it ink? He knelt down, touching it with a trembling finger. It was cold. It was wet. He lifted a pea tin, cheese, trials, turning and danced. he saw that was quickly swallowed by the wind. He fell aback this, pogging to every corner, measuring the depth of the empty well, and taking samples of the gray dust that littered the floors. Elias and the others were kept in a nearby hotel, questioned repeatedly. "Tell us again, Elias," a detective said, leaning over a small table. "Where did Headmaster Thorne go? I've heard in Vol this way of giant Surzens. They did buy the more in Zizi Kramau. Fast trade and meeting. The Heindel toll of Indulda. Common pod casitations, common bane dober." It wasn't just place even if they couldn't name it. It was those of various starvations and Bob and more in the cases here of field best. It had been a month since the fire. His room was exactly as he had left it, filled with comic books, model airplanes, and the comfortable mess of a normal life. But he was different. He moved with a deliberate care, his eyes always scanning the corners of the ceiling. He picked up a black marker from his desk. He held it for a long time, watching the way the light glinted off the plastic casing. He thought about the well. He sized praying. He tied the Parker and Dork to the wall beside his bed. He didn't draw a picture. He wrote a single word in March, bold letters.